This is another one of those movies where I look at the rating and then I watch it and I think, oh, did they get this wrong or did I just miss something? I mean, in Australia anyway, Queen of the Desert is rated M for mature themes, and the M rating, I think it barely earns it. So let me tell you why I think that. First of all, violence. There isn't any really, or there is a... Well, there's not really much to speak of. You see armed men kind of on horseback firing guns into the air and that kind of thing. And a woman does actually get grazed by a bullet on her arm. So you do see evidence of a bullet wound which has bled slightly. And she seems to be mostly unharmed. It's certainly not a life-threatening injury, but that's kind of really the only violence that happens in the film. There's mention of violence and violent episodes in the film. So, for example, there's mention of war and kind of war planning and things like that, and enlistment. But, you know, and the discussion of murder and a possible assassination. But again, it's just kind of mentioned. It doesn't really have a strong theme at all in the film. So violence isn't a big thing. Blood and gore. Again, you see that bloody bullet scrape on that woman's arm, but apart from that, the blood and gore is more animal related. So there's a marketplace where you see animal carcasses hanging, you see animals being cooked, and the head of it's the goat and sheep is particularly valued as a delicacy. So you see animal heads being cooked and prepared. You also see an animal head being given as an offering, like a peace offering, a gift. So, but again, these are only small scenes that happen throughout the film. It's not something which is particularly heavily focused on or anything. Sex and nudity. This is probably where the film works hardest to earn its M rating, but even then, I wouldn't say sex is a strong theme in this film at all. There is a couple of relationships develop through the film. One of them you see a little bit more intimately than the other one. As intimate as it gets, isn't you see a kissing scene, which is actually quite grand and old-fashioned. It's quite beautifully done, actually, particularly if you like old-fashioned style filmmaking. It's a very extravagantly shot kissing scene. You do see this couple embrace. You also see her kind of offer herself to him in the bedroom. They kind of kiss and he lies with her, but you don't see anything else happen after that. In another relationship, there is infidelity involved. I mean, this woman is with a married man. You kind of see them kissing and showing a lot of affection toward one another, but again, you certainly don't see any sex scenes. Nudity is probably the big issue, I suppose, in this film. And even then, you never see any full nudity. You don't even see any shirtless men or anything like that. What you do see is a woman in the bath. She's actually fully clothed because she's bathing outdoors. But she's wearing a very sheer gown, which clings to her. So you see the very clear outlines of her breasts and nipples. So that's it. I guess that is the reason the film has been rated M. Alcohol, yes, there's alcohol in the film. You see people drinking spirits and wine and champagne, and a little bit of smoking as well. Cigars and cigarettes, particularly old-fashioned kind of 1900s long style cigarettes. And there isn't any gambling, but you do see some camel racing in the film. Likewise, swearing isn't a particularly big subject either. You certainly don't hear any F words or S words or even A words, but there's a few B words, so like bitch and bastard and bloody, that kind of stuff. A little bit of name calling, but that's really about it. Obviously, the setting of the film, there's a few religious references and discussions of various religions and the kind of peoples. So there's some opinions shared on Jews, on Germans, on French people and Arabs. It's not what I would call particularly offensive, but it's just kind of mentioned because the film's set in between 1902 and about 1916, 17. So there's opinions of the period which sort of come to the surface. They're raised, touched on, and then moved on. But while we're talking about that, I guess the other thing to be aware of is that there is quite a bit of misogyny during the film. Because of the setting, because of the period setting, there's a few scenes where you get a very clear picture of how women were treated, or if not treated, then certainly regarded around the early 1900s. And by that I mean the idea of, should women be educated? Should they be entitled to go and do their own thing? Do they need to be invited to to places rather than just enter into a party, for example, of their own free will and that kind of thing. Again, it isn't particularly over the top. It's very much in keeping of the period, but it is just one of those things that, you know, I guess be aware of it going into it, that there is this slight misogyny in the film. But the purpose of it isn't to actually upset or offend, it's just to demonstrate how people, women in particular, were kind of regarded in the period. So that's really about it for Queen of the Desert. I should mention it's quite a long film. It's well over 2 hours long, and it does feel quite plodding, I guess, in some parts. If you're looking for a film that goes into the remarkable work that Gertrude Bell did, this might not be that film, although there isn't really anything else out there that does really describe who she was and just how remarkable she was. This focuses more on her love life, which is a shame in a way, because I think there is, well, I know many other critics and certainly historians agree with me, there is so much more to this woman than her romantic life. So that, I feel, is a little bit of a letdown in this film. But if you're going to watch this, the soundtrack is absolutely extraordinary. I fell in love with the music in this film, and also the sweeping shots of the vistas. The locations are extraordinary. So if you do go and see Queen of the Desert, it stars Nicole Kidman, and I really would like to hear what you think. Leave me a comment below, and of course, before you go, please don't forget to subscribe.